Ha! Those cockney klutzes could never reach space. What's that? My phone is ringing, but for some reason only I can hear it. Hello?
Mr. Astronaut, the agency is aware of your activities in developing a launch vehicle. Our reports indicate you've been in contact with several organizations on selling this vehicle for non-peaceful purposes. We implore you to come in for some questioning, just to clear things up. You're not under arrest. We just want to talk.
What? No, just hold on a second. Wait a second. I'm gonna call my lawyer. Hey, did that suspicious Soviet rocket put your satellite in the wrong orbit? Was one of your spacecraft smacked by Starlink? Have your controlled documents been accidentally sent to the wrong country? When facing serious extraterrestrial litigation, you're gonna need a space lawyer that you can trust. Look at the number below because you better call upon.
What was that?
I think my lawyer just got arrested. Now what? Morning, everyone. I'm being investigated by the CIA. Always a good start or end of the week. Today, we're going to talk about a movie that's nearly 20 years old. The Astronaut Farmer. Now, I'm not a movie reviewer, so if you want that fix, go somewhere else. Instead, we're going to look at the movie from the aerospace perspective. Now, just to be clear, I have not been launched into space to watch bad movies because I lack the technical, monetary, and legal capacity to do that sort of thing. Now, this isn't just nitpicking the movie. I'll actually design a rocket capable of launching me into space. Cool, right? Oh, just because I wanted to say this video is cursed. It was originally supposed to come out this time last year, but I delayed it to work on criticizing Starship Part 3. So then, later on, I finally got around to making it in April of this year, 2022. And I had it fully filmed and halfway edited when I lost it all in the hard drive failure I mentioned earlier. So, let's hope this one works. The Astronaut Farmer is the story of a former aerospace engineer and test pilot who dreams of flying into space. To do this, he has assembled a Mercury-Atlas launch vehicle in his barn out of spare parts. What kicks off the plot is Charlie Farmer buying 10,000 pounds of fuel, drawing the attention of several federal agencies who are naturally worried about a guy who built a missile in his barn and don't want to see a civilian launch himself into space. Another pressure in Farmer's life is looming financial ruin, which causes him to do a failed first launch attempt. Seriously injured, Farmer decides to abandon his dream of going to space and instead focus on his family, not wanting to risk another failed launch attempt. However, his wife's father died earlier in the movie and left them a considerable amount of money, which covers the family's debts and would allow Charlie to build another rocket. Farmer launches himself into orbit on his rocket named the Dreamer, struggles a bit with his electronics on orbit, then successfully re-enters and lands, reunites with his family, and they live happily ever after. You used clips from Salvage 1, you liar! It's in the pipeline. This movie exists in the guy builds a rocket in his backyard and launches himself to space subgenre of science fiction, which does actually exist. I've read at least one book with this premise, and there's a handful of books and movies about the subject. More recent versions of this fiction have obviously been inspired by Robert Truax's Project Private Enterprise. Seriously, Salvage 1 is clearly based off of him. I'm not here to do a movie review, I'm here to look at the movie from a technical standpoint, so we're going to do that. I've split my technical issues into big errors, technical issues, and miscellaneous problems. There's a lot of overlap between them, and this isn't really any big particular order, just kind of a generalized grouping. So what's first? Charlie Farmer is dead.
Well, that sounds harsh.
The first launch attempt in the movie ends in a disastrous failure due to thrust issues, combustion stability. It's never really elaborated. And due to this failure, the rocket doesn't go up into space, but down into the side, out of the barn, and careening across West Texas like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon before tumbling to a halt. For the record, this is a real Atlas launch failure like the one described in the movie. Notice how it goes up and then down, kaboom. The Mercury capsule in the movie does have an escape tower, but I guess that fails and just falls off during the launch failure. Even without the explosion, the barn would have been destroyed, the Farmer family maimed, and several of the reporters on site in the trajectory would have been killed or otherwise harmed. Which is quite a few lawsuits, if you think about it. This brings up another major problem. Even if Farmer survives, he's still probably going to prison. He does 2 illegal launches in the movie. The first one was not cleared or authorized, and he did it anyway. And the second one definitely wasn't authorized. The movie paints the FAA as this condescending and authoritarian, you puny civilians can't go to space kind of organization. There's also references to the Patriot Act and kind of things like that. I'm not sure what the filmmakers are going for. I'm not really going to comment much on it, but it's just kind of weird. One of the big plot points is that the FAA won't let Farmer launch, which is actually understandable. Farmer's flight plan that he submits, as described, is it's inadequate. And off the top of my head, there's no discussion of orbital parameters, flight safety, or even registering his launch site, which would probably require some environmental review. You also have to remember that Farmer's launch site is his ranch in middle or western Texas, so his flight path would take him over populated areas. That's not brought up at all. Even if it was an illegal launch, the FAA would still acknowledge it, because plenty of agencies could track it, including NORAD. So I don't know why they would be denying it. Again, it kind of goes with the weird positions the movie seems to have. I don't know. Most importantly, Farmer fails to file his flight plan with the FCC. That rocket has a radio on it, and so does his spacecraft, which means he would have to file it with the FCC. Also, Farmer flies by a communications satellite in a bizarrely low orbit, I don't know what that one is, and has some technical issues because of this. Had he filed a proper launch license and gotten it, this would not have been an issue. And then in the movie, there's some dramatic stuff with loss of signal, but this is going to happen. He has one ground station in Texas, and the Earth is round. So of course this was going to happen. Overall, I think the movie has just some serious bouts of critical research failure. It treats a private citizen building his own rocket to launch himself into space as this massive anomaly, despite the history of private space efforts and space tourism. For example, the movie was filmed in 2005, it came out in 2006, but back in 2004, Spaceship One was the first privately built rocket to carry a citizen into space. And during this time period, there was the Ansari X Prize, which Spaceship One was part of. So this isn't unheard of. It was happening right around then. The idea of a guy doing it in his own backyard isn't completely unheard of, but we also have Bob Truax doing this back in the 70s. The funniest thing is that in the first scene, there is a model of Canadian Arrow, which is one of the Ansari X Prize entrants. It didn't go anywhere. Speaking of rocket design, that Atlas is completely wrong. Let's start with the obvious. The Atlas missile and Atlas launch vehicle used 110 metric tons, that's about 243,000 pounds, of propellant. Not 10,000. Also, the fuel used in the movie, or at least is mentioned by Farmer, is a combination of kerosene and hydrazine instead of RP1. Okay. That's an interesting combination. The only real launch vehicle study I've found that uses that is the low-cost shuttle surrogate booster from the 80s. I can't find any engine testing with it that I know of. And most importantly, hydrazine is a dangerous and smelly chemical. No wonder the FBI was interested in him. We also have no mention of how Farmer gets or stores liquid oxygen. I don't see a tank farm or frost anywhere. I'm going to try to avoid being pedantic here, but let's take a look at the Atlas portrayed in the movie. It's inaccurate. We'll start from the bottom up. This is what the bottom of Charlie Farmer's Atlas looks like, and here's what a real one is. It's inaccurate. The Atlas ICBM, which is the basis for the Mercury-Atlas launch vehicle and, well, the Atlas launch vehicle in general, used a stage-and-a-half launch configuration. What this does is it has all engines start at liftoff, but at some point in flight, it'll drop the sea-level optimized booster engines to save weight while going to orbit. This is not seen with Charlie Farmer's Dreamer Atlas. We do see 3 engines light at liftoff, but they don't do stage-and-a-half. And there were 2 other rocket engines on Atlas, the LR-101 verniers for steering. You can see them in the CGI model, but not firing. I think this is how that happened. Those are real MA5 or derivative engines, by the way. You can rent them at Norton Aerospace Props. Or at least you could. It's been a while since I looked at their website. Except, of course, the big problem is that the center engine is missing the cooling jacket. Because it's not an accurate Atlas. You know what this makes this, though? This means that Charlie Farmer built an SSTO. Huh. The real problem with building an Atlas is that it uses balloon tanks, which means that these propellant tanks are either under constant pressurization or with a special tensioning device to keep them from imploding. You can see something like this with pop cans. One that hasn't been opened can easily be stepped on. It's really structurally rigid, but the second you open it up, you can squish it. So here's a few images of Atlases in manufacturing, just to kind of show you. So here's some more images of Atlas being manufactured, which you can see it's being manufactured horizontally, not vertically. If you want to lose a few days, go take a look at the San Diego Air and Space Museum's Atlas Negative Archive on Flickr. It's got images from the development of Atlas, a few other things. Also a great resource on the aesthetics of engineering in the 50s and 60s. Farmer's problem is that he's going to have to figure out how to replicate the welding process and assembly for 0.015 to 0.048 inch thick 301 extra full hard stainless steel in his barn. Now this is a nitpick, but we don't see Charlie run a test program for his rocket. We're not going to see full-scale engine tests. He doesn't do any wet dress rehearsals of the booster, and that escape tower of his, we don't even know if it works. It's a big solid motor, so where did he get that? Or how did he make it? Not only would this prevent any launch catastrophes, it would also help him be taken seriously by the FAA, FCC, and associated law enforcement agencies. That would have helped him a lot. The orbital flight is, odd. The movie says that, including the technical issues, Farmer orbits the Earth about 9 times, which is about 13.5 hours. The problem is, the movie makes it look like he spent more than a day in space. I'm not sure what to make of it, just pointing that out. Also, the re-entry sequence is wrong. The movie shows it as retrofire, drop. Whereas in reality, it's retrofire, slowly enter the atmosphere. Because this way isn't fun. Also, this is really pedantic here, but the thrusters Farmer uses to reorient his capsule are the ones here, whereas the ones that would have been really used are up here. Farmer's launch is an exemplar of low-budget CGI. I'm not being mean, I just had to point it out. And one thing that does bug me about the movie is, where is Bruce Willis working when he launches? It looks like NORAD, but it's never really given a clear sign of where this is. And why is everyone in the room applauding? Why? Oh, and these coordinates are in the middle of Dallas, by the way. So for another little nitpick, some of the schematics you see in the movie are for Redstones and Little Joes instead of Atlas. I just thought I'd point that out. I could nitpick forever, but that makes me look like a jerk. I still actually enjoy this movie. There's plenty of good lines in it, and it's worth watching at least once. You know what this movie got right? Advertising. There is nothing illegal about putting an ad on the side of your rocket for a launch. You can see this to full effect in the post-Soviet Russian space program, mostly in the 90s. Look! Space Pepsi. And great! Pizza Hut on the side of a Proton launch for an ISS module. Seriously. But let's focus on something else. Something more core to the issue of the video. Can you build a rocket to launch yourself into space? Dispense with a few obvious answers to this question. Yes, you can build your own Mercury-Atlas if you have billionaire, I can do whatever I want money and capabilities. The real question is if a bunch of non-wealthy amateurs can do it, and not just buy tickets on Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin, which have both had serious failures now of their vehicles. First things first, there is no way amateurs can build a crewed orbital launch vehicle. The launch vehicle itself will cost somewhere between $100 to $500 million alone, and the crew capsule will be equal to or more than that on top of it, especially if you want to keep the occupant alive. Orbital launch is beyond our capabilities, so instead we'll be focusing on suborbital flight, like the old Redstone rocket that was used for the first 2 crewed American space flights. Other inspirations for this rocket will be Bob Truax's Project Private Enterprise rocket, the Ansari X Prize contestants, and the present-day Copenhagen Suborbital's Spica or Spica rocket. For requirements, I'm not going that too in-depth with this. I'm going to assume it's 2.5 kilometers a second delta V to go from the surface of the Earth to space. And my capsule is going to weigh 900 kilograms because that's roughly 10 times what I weigh. The rest, I leave to you to imagine. What about an abort system, Mr. Safety? Prayer? Nice. The rocket will be 36 inches in diameter because that's a little wider than I am. And the propellant will be liquid oxygen and ethanol. LOX is the obvious choice for a safe oxidizer because it's currently used in rocketry. It's also used in industrial capacity, and it's easily available. Ethanol has the benefits of being very available, it's room temperature storable, it has historical use in launch vehicles, and you can do some commercialization with it. This isn't the most refined study. I was going to describe the design process, but then I realized that the next video you're going to see my face in is going to be designing a better O-Trag, where you are going to get to know these equations and more intimately and grow to hate them. So we'll just save those for February. Take a good look at them, I guess. Here is my DIY Redstone. It's a single-stage pressure-fed booster made of 304 full hard steel and has a fiberglass pressure tank. 304 full hard is used in beer kegs, and fiberglass is a common enough material. The engine has a thrust of 68.42 kilonewtons, or 15,383 pounds of force, with a chamber pressure of 250 psi. Gross liftoff weight is 5,369 kilograms, or 11,837 pounds, and the vehicle weighs 951 kilograms, or 2,097 pounds dry, without the payload. Due to the nature of a pressure-fed system, and using more common materials, this vehicle has a dry mass that is 27% the weight of the propellants. 4 times what you get from a conventional launch vehicle, and more than twice that of a classic pressure-fed booster. A real vehicle is obviously more complicated than what I've presented here, but this could give you some good mass estimates. Now, as to how much this thing would cost to do, 10 million or under. The way I see it, you're going to spend at least $1 million on fees, permits, licensing, filings, and other legal aspects to your program, because this is a very large amateur rocket going to space. You're also going to spend at least $1 million on your engine test program, because you're going to be developing small to large liquid rocket engines to put you into space. The booster itself is going to cost probably around $1 million to build, because that's about what Gary Hudson spent in today's money building the first Percheron. Wait, did that blow up? The capsule and pressure suit will cost at least $1 million each. You're building a spacecraft that can carry someone through flight and recovery, and probably several abort modes, while maintaining compliance with the FAA and FCC regulations. It's a crew capsule, not a student science experiment. What will determine the overall price for the program is how many rockets you will build for the test program. I would fly at least one booster with mock-up capsule on top to test the booster itself, and then another flight to test the abort system, just to prove that they work within design limitations. You could see how this would end up costing a lot if things go wrong. An easy way to offset costs would be put ads on the side of the booster. An amateur space launch, especially one carrying people into space, will draw lots of attention, which means advertisers will flow in to get eyes on their ads. Unless it goes wrong, I guess. You also have the option to use this as a commercial sounding rocket. Put paid payloads on test flights, or even your own amateur space shot. There's got to be someone who wants to put something into space. There's an opportunity for you. Depending on how easy it is to make your rocket, or if it's reusable, you could start your own commercial sounding rocket business. There's people who want to shoot things into space, and you could provide it for them. Now, I will warn you, the commercial suborbital sounding rocket market isn't that big. It's rather limited, but it's an option. If something like this interests you, hit me up. Can you DIY a Mercury-Atlas? Sure, if you have the money, technical capacity, and fill out the proper paperwork. You're not watching The Astronaut Farmer for technical advice. You're going to watch the movie because it's kind of fun. It's a feel-good, inspiring movie. Building your own atlas is probably a bad idea, but a Redstone might do. If you choose this path, get ready for a tough task ahead. It is possible to build and run your own amateur space program. History has shown several attempts at this, and it is happening right now in Denmark. Honestly, it is really cool to see this happen, and I look forward to them succeeding, and for any future amateur space programs that might appear in the future. Hey, you forgot to hang up your phone. Oh, shoot! Did you hear everything?
Yes.
Am I in the clear? Yeah. Great! Hello? Oh, yes. General, Mr. President. Sorry, I just saw the news. Congratulations on winning your, election. No, I've been following it, don't worry. Say, are you still up for that offer I have for improving your country's image? We'll wait a bit for the news to die down over the controversies around your ascendancy to power. Yes. Yes. No, don't worry. It's better. How does February sound? The 24th? Perfect. I'll see you then.